The metaphor I like to think of is if you're driving your car and you have the emergency brake on, you could have the gas pedals down and you're driving smoothly, except you have this one problem. The emergency brake's down. So then you're basically using extra force with the gas in order to compensate for that one issue. There's an underlying issue of this emergency brake. And so I see that with the subconscious mind. If we have core limiting stories in our subconscious from our childhood most of the time, then those limiting stories can be like that emergency brake. So even if we have all the willpower, we have all the motivational talks, and we have our purpose and our why, and we have our excitement and our motivation even, right? That stuff can be powerful, right? Because that's the gas. But if you have these limiting stories in the subconscious, it's going to slow you down. It's going to create the resistance. It's going to create the fear. That's sort of counterproductive.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about ending negative self-talk, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. I'm delighted to welcome Joel Bein. Joel is the founder of Human Liberation, LLC, and the host of The Joel Bein Show. Joel is also the founder and conductor of the New Orleans Chamber Players and a Socratic guide at Acton Academy. You can reach Joel at his website, thehumanliberation.co, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Joel. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This is going to be so useful. Oh my gosh. I think every person has felt those feelings of self-doubt. We have that inner critic going on. We feel like we're an imposter if anything goes our way. And a lot of people try to use their willpower to try to just muscle through this. And I think you have an opinion about that. Do you want to share what you think? Maybe there's a better way?
Yeah, absolutely. Willpower may have its place in certain situations, but I see it in terms of personal growth and feeling free, feeling freedom, feeling at peace. If you're using willpower, that's sort of counterproductive. And the metaphor I like to think of is if you're driving your car and you have the emergency brake on, you could have the gas pedals down and you're driving smoothly, except you have this one problem. The emergency brake's down. So then you're basically using extra force with the gas in order to compensate for that one issue. There's an underlying issue of this emergency brake. And so I see that with the subconscious mind. If we have core limiting stories in our subconscious from our childhood most of the time, then those limiting stories can be like that emergency brake. So even if we have all the willpower, we have all the motivational talks, and we have our purpose and our why, and we have our excitement and our motivation even, right? That stuff can be powerful, right? Because that's the gas. But if you have these limiting stories in the subconscious, it's going to slow you down. It's going to create the resistance. It's going to create the fear. And I think it's almost like in our culture now, we think this is the human condition, is we're just going to have inner critics. We're just going to have resistance. Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art, this is a very common book referenced in creative entrepreneurial world. And we need to push through and conquer our resistance, right? And okay, not dismissing the utility of that perspective. I've gained value from that. But the question is that actually the human condition? Is that necessary to push through? And what I get curious about is, where do those inner critics come from? What's the root cause? And let's get to know those and actually help liberate the inner critics, liberate those subconscious parts of ourselves, et cetera, from those stories that are actually creating the negative thoughts, negative emotions, and negative actions, right? So if we get to the root of things, we can clear away and we can feel free.
Isn't that wonderful? I really like that analogy. It is helpful to use a visual image to take complex ideas and to be able to make them understandable and manageable. So if I'm driving a car, my emergency brake is on. I'm trying to overcome. There's something holding me back. So I push harder. But the thing that's holding me back is still there. And me pushing harder did not remove it. I might still be able to move forward, but there's something sluggish. And I love that you're addressing the unconscious, because that matters so much. It's estimated that about 95% of our brain activity is unconscious. So if we are trying to use the 5% of our conscious to be able to, I talk about a David and Goliath situation where we've got 5 against 95. we're going to have some problems. So it's so important in order to really create change, I believe, to be able to address where the problem is. Where is that parking brake? Let's figure it out and let's release it so that we can move forward. And isn't it wonderful when we're not fighting ourselves, we can move forward faster? Oh, that's beautiful. I would love to hear your story. Why do you do this? Why does this matter to you?
I'm a huge fan of the Howard Thurman quote. He said, "Ask not what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who have come alive." I've always been very passion and purpose driven. My first love is classical music, still making music now, pouring my art and my heart into music making. And I'm also pouring myself into entrepreneurship and creativity and serving people so that we can break these cycles of trauma that are at the core of our species, basically. So that has always been core to me. I question a lot of premises. I'm a free thinker, and I'm interested in getting curious about the root causes of the issues we have individually and collectively as humans. So I've always been interested in that. Probably about age 19, started just asking questions about how things work and rekindling that curiosity after, it kind of dwindled quite a bit because going through, a conventional school system, that curiosity is not cultivated. And my home environment wasn't ideal. On paper, there were things that were nice, right? My mom read books to me, got to do music and sports, and lived in a pretty good neighborhood. But behind the scenes, behind the veil of that, there was plenty of trauma and dysfunction and not feeling emotionally safe. Sometimes even physically not safe at times. My parents were fighting chronically, sometimes severely. So that was just kind of the backdrop, was kind of this sympathetic nervous system experience, right? Like, when's the next time they're going to fight? Even if they weren't fighting, your nervous system's just like, well, wait, when's it going to happen? It's going to happen around the corner, right? So that sort of backdrop is where I grew up. And I just found my curiosity stumbling for whatever reason. Maybe it's just my soul's purpose, but I just found myself getting curious about parenting philosophy, education philosophy, the roots of violence in this culture. That brought me, to trauma, right? And so then it's like, well, why do people do these things? They get into these amygdala states, and why do we have these inner critics? Again, it's just asking why, and then you start getting a little bit more specific about, okay, there's neurological structures that are feeding our subconscious, which are then getting activated and triggered in certain situations, and then that's taking us over. And trauma, by the way, can be super severe or can be just really mild. I define that really widely. But yeah, I've just been interested in breaking these cycles so that we can free the inner child that's naturally curious and creative and individualistic and alive. And when people can clear away this conditioning, then we can break those cycles and we can become alive. We can become alive as individuals.
I love that, to be alive and to be free and to be curious. And isn't that wonderful that these are not only the goals of what we want to become, but it's kind of the steps of how to get there. That beginning of some curiosity, awakening that, asking some questions rather than accepting a blanket statement saying, well, this is the way that it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. Instead, if we ask some questions of why? Why is it that way? Why do people do that way? Why are the thoughts that are in my head there? Where did they come from? And I think when we start asking some of those questions, then we can start finding some answers. And isn't it wonderful that there are answers and that we don't have to stay stuck, that we can become free? And I thought it was sad and true that on paper, a lot of families look great, but that doesn't mean that there isn't heartache inside. So I think this affects most of us on some level, if not all. So now, what do we do about it? Do you want to walk us through what you would do with a limiting belief?
Yeah, I would first just sort of share that I believe we now have technology. I mean, there's so many different tools. The technology that we have allows us to free ourselves very rapidly. And I think of limiting beliefs through another metaphor of the Santa Claus effect. So most of us grew up, we believed that Santa Claus is real. We created a story that Santa Claus is real based on media and songs and seeing Santa at the mall and all sorts of sense data coming into our field, parents telling us things, seeing presents, etc. And we had a pretty strong belief Santa Claus is real. And then one day, boom, we realized there's a new explanation. We realized we never actually saw this dude called Santa. And then, boom, the belief disappeared. And ever since that moment, you stopped believing in Santa. And the belief never came back. So, this is just a concept in our minds. We're meaning making machines. We create stories in order to try to make sense of our reality, make sense of our environment. And in the case of adverse experience, they're trying to maintain attachment, maintain love, maintain safety. So we create stories to try to make sense and cope with situations. But those stories are just neural structures, concepts through our meaning making apparatus. And so when we just go connect to this part of ourselves that has this story that's contributing to and causing these day to day frustrations of negative self talk, of fear of failure, then we can actually liberate those patterns. So I like to help people connect the dots between these core, deep rooted limiting beliefs and then the actual issues that are happening in your day to day life. So maybe it's money anxiety. I had a client who, successful entrepreneur making good money, but when he looked at his bank account, he felt anxiety. He had racing thoughts. I don't have enough money. You know, he's afraid about the future and security. And he came into working with me. He self-rated his money anxiety as 10 out of 10 in severity. And then after 12 weeks of working with me, he self-rated it as 0 out of 10. And all we did was just find these specific core limiting beliefs about money, about his own self-efficacy and self-esteem and so forth. We find the beliefs that are the main beliefs that are contributing to that everyday pain and anxiety. And then we connect to those subconscious parts of ourselves. Again, we get curious and we walk them through this process, which I can share more about. Pretty simple, and just helping this part, this child part usually, to help that part recognize that it made meaning in that certain event. It made meaning, I'm not good enough. It made meaning, making money is hard. It made meaning, the way to be safe is to have money. It made meaning, I don't have enough money. It made meaning that I can't do it. All sorts of different stories that would be contributing to that anxiety. And when we help that part realize that you never actually saw this story, you created this story. And then we help that part let go. And then the belief is gone, like Santa Claus isn't real. And then that money anxiety reduces every time we clear a belief. And we just keep finding the beliefs that are in that pattern and we keep on knocking things out. And then the pattern disintegrates.
Isn't that wonderful? I like the analogy very much of the Santa Claus, where there's a story that you believe deeply, and there seems to be plenty of evidence that it's true. I mean, I've seen pictures and I've seen him at the mall and I sat on his lap and I had a picture taken. It's in my photo book. All of these things seem absolutely true. And then at some point we realize, wait a minute, this is not what I supposed. This is not what I thought it was. And your example is so wonderful that we create stories, that the things that are concerning us, the things that we think are concerning us, usually aren't what's really concerning us. It's something deeper. It's matching the story that we made up because we're trying to make sense out of what's going on. This is what's going on. I don't understand it. I want it to make sense. So I'm going to create a story that makes it make sense to me. And then I'll understand what the rules are so that I can be successful. However, the stories that we make, and we're making these when we're little kids, they're not accurate. Things are not what they seemed to be at the time. It doesn't mean what we thought it meant. So we need to look at it again as an adult with that from the outside, kind of a meta view, and say, wait a minute, that's not what that meant. So I thought your example with money is beautiful. Do you want to follow that one and show kind of what you would do to help somebody who came with a feeling of, I got to work really, really hard for money. Money is scarce. I never have enough and I'm not safe. And you know what? I'm pretty worthless if I don't have money. So what if somebody came with that? What would we do?
Yeah, I mean, I always start with the trailhead. What are you feeling in your body right now? What's occurring day to day, right? So the beliefs are what's underneath the hood, but like what are the symptoms here? You know, so getting really clear from an observational standpoint, is it when you open your bank account on your computer, you feel this tightness in your chest and you're noticing these racing thoughts, you know, or maybe there's a different pattern around overworking. This is a really common one. Pretty passionate about this one. People getting in hustle mode. And we grow up a lot of times in this culture with messages around work ethic and that being intrinsically noble. And that gets tied up in our self-worth oftentimes. So people might be suffering from burnout, might be suffering from inability to rest and not feel guilty, inability to connect with friends and family and just be calm and present rather than compulsively check the phone, right? What's getting in the way? It's like, let's identify that. And then let's identify that in the body. Okay, what's alive? When you want to check your phone and compulsively look at email, okay, there's a part of you wanting to do that. That's not your true self. That's this part of you. Okay, well, what's that part of you have to say? Where do you feel it in your body? And then what does that part of you want to say? Oh, I'm worried that I'm going to get fired. Oh, interesting. Tell me more. Right now we go down this trailhead a little bit and we can get a little bit deeper into figuring out what are some of those beliefs. There's probably going to be more than one belief that's contributing to any given pattern, right? And so then there's different exercises we can do to kind of connect to that subconscious mind to give us more information. And then the key with all this work is that skill of sort of archaeological digging into the subconscious to find the stories that are the most root striking, right? Because you could clear a belief like I'm going to get fired. Like that's a story. You could use the technique that I use to clear that. But is there a deeper story? Is there a story about the way to get love is to work hard? Right? Now we've hit a root. So now we can connect with that part. And typically we're just clearing out one story at a time. We just keep on pulling these weeds up. And over time, we can pull out these weeds that are in our mental garden. I imagine you've heard of Louise Hay. I'm a huge fan of Louise Hay.
Me too.
So she has these beautiful metaphors around the mental garden and how we can choose these thoughts and we can let go of these old stories and then just choose empowering stories. And she's the queen of affirmations and she's a wonderful human. She was, and I'm just so grateful for her. And what I also notice in people's perhaps in the standard sort of mainstream interpretation of how to do affirmations, people might get stuck because they'll be doing affirmations just trying to add in these healthy stories, add in these fruits and vegetables into the garden, but these weeds are in the way, right? So Louise Hay was just as adamant about letting go of the old stories as she was about bringing in the empowering stories. And so when we pull out these stories, then we notice we continue to become freer and freer. And then if you want to add in new stories that are more empowering, go for it. I'm interested in the subtraction process. There's so much of this adding approach to personal growth in our culture. And I'm interested in let's declutter the mind. I mean, I'm just so grateful for this tool that I've been diving into my own journey and the past 3 years. And I mean, I've just seen the noise in my head is probably 80% quieter than it was 3 years ago. Permanently. I'm just in a state of, because these weeds are gone. Right. And that's possible for everybody now. And I very much want people to experience that.
Oh, that is wonderful. Isn't that amazing? Another visual image. We have a garden and we have weeds and we'd like to plant something new. But first, we need to get rid of the weeds. And it's interesting. We kind of started talking about the concept of money, and you morphed it into something that is maybe even more common. And that is that desire to work and overwork. I must be busy. I must have a long to-do list. I must be doing something constantly. And then when you peel back the layers and peel back the layers, I really appreciated that you got down to the root of, am I lovable? And I think another one is, do I have value? Am I lovable? Do I have value? And I think that mostly when we peel back the layers, that's where we get to almost always is, am I lovable?
Yeah, that's the core self-worth bucket, I
Mm-hmm.
call it, right? So we have I'm not worthy, I'm worthless, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not valuable, I'm not capable, I can't do it. These are all very similar, sometimes extremely similar, right? To say
Mm-hmm.
I'm worthless is almost the same thing as saying I'm not worthy, but they're actually different concepts. And so I've found working with myself and others that even those separate, those slight differences in beliefs, we want to be sure that we're clearing those out and pulling. That's a separate weed to pull out. I mean, it doesn't. Sometimes you can put those two together in the process of clearing a belief, but yeah, I mean, these big core self worth wounds are going to impact every area of life. Like, I would just invite everyone listening to really consider how these stories will be impacting every area of life. Let's just take the most common one in the world, as far as I tell, which is I'm not good enough. And people listening, if you're feeling up to it, you can just check in with that belief. Is it feel real? You feel a weight in your body when you say that out loud? If so, that's indicating that it's present, right? And then you think about, how is that impacting every area of my life, right? Because these stories are these, it's like these programs that are up on your computer that are taking up all this space, and they're cluttering your experience, and then they're signaling up to your thoughts, your emotions, to your actions, right? So if you have I'm not good enough, that's going to be creating the self-doubt thoughts around, let's say it's parenting. You're doubting your ability to connect with your child. Maybe it's you're doubting your ability to make money. Like, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to start that business. I'm not sure I'm going to whatever, because there's still self-doubt. And then that creates overwhelm or fear. That's the emotions, right? And then what do? You either you don't take action, or you try to use the willpower, right? So these stories, the self-worth ones in particular, are the first ones to clear, because they're going to impact all the areas of life: relationships, finances, health. I mean, just think about how much core beliefs about yourself are affecting your physical health. Like, you're carrying these in your body. Like, as I work with people, we clear out these stories, the body starts opening up, the body starts becoming more harmonized and balanced. I had a belief when I first started doing this work, I had a belief it's not okay to relax.
What would happen if you relaxed? And what would that mean?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I'm trying to think back to what that subconscious part was thinking at the time. But I think it was a lot from my mom, just being a bundle of anxiety like all the time. And she didn't let herself relax. And I might have kind of taken on her own stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just was learning about the world. This is must be how the world works, right? As a child.
Gotcha.
So I remember when the moment that belief cleared, I felt this huge drop in my left shoulder blade area. And my back pain ever since then has been gone down 70% or so. That's my subjective experience. But I mean, I struggled a lot with back pain in my 20s. And then in my early 30s, when I started doing this, like, it's not really a problem. And so it's all these areas of life are being affected by these stories.
Right. And it does become physical, or at least it can become physical. And statistics, I mean, the CDC even says that about 90% of the things that we go to a doctor for have an emotional basis. So we are stressed and we are concerned and we have these things, and they literally manifest. It's like they want to be heard. And if you can't hear me, I'll hurt here. And then maybe you'll notice that something needs to change. Something needs to happen. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get that cleared, and I'm glad that you were able to make progress, and I'm glad that you're able to help other people make progress. That's beautiful. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
I would love to connect with people if they're interested in learning more about this. I created a resource called the Self-Doubt Playbook, and I would love to give this to everyone in the audience. Usually just give this to my paying clients. But I really wanted to share this, and it's an opportunity for people to empower themselves and become their own teacher. I'm really a big fan of self-healing. I had a couple of podcast episodes about how to do self-therapy. And I think there's a lot of value in learning to be your own self-facilitator. Now, sometimes we need that guide, especially when we're first starting out. I think we need that as well. But this technology for clearing a belief is available to us. And I'm just abundantly seeking to share this with the world. So the self-doubt playbook, if you're an entrepreneur, you're sick and tired of these negative voices, you're sick and tired of trying to use willpower discipline, this can help you actually get to the root and clear out these patterns, clear out this imposter syndrome, clear out this negative self-talk, anxiety, whatever the case may be. So the self-doubt playbook has two components. It's got first my guide on how to clear a single limiting belief. So this is just the step-by-step process for connecting to that child part, helping that part let go of the story. And that can take 15 minutes once you learn this method. So that's this foundational tool that I still use on myself. I'm continuing to find little nuanced beliefs that are in my consciousness, continuing to go into deeper layers to continue to integrate and heal. So that's like the foundational tool. And then the second piece of this playbook is a mini course I created on finding beliefs. So that's a separate skill, basically, to be able to get connected to that subconscious and help yourself find the exact sets of stories that are causing your particular problem or causing your particular self-talk and emotions. So when you develop that skill, it supercharges your ability to liberate yourself. So we have finding beliefs and clearing those beliefs. And the more you do that, the more you keep letting go, and you can actually come alive, right? And stop being trapped in your mind. So yeah, if you want to see that resource and connect with me, just message me the word playbook on LinkedIn, and I'll send that resource to you. So just search for Joel Bein. That's Bein. And I should be one of the first results. Joel Bein, founder at Human Liberation. Just send me the word playbook on LinkedIn, and I'll send that resource over to you, and I would love to connect with you.
Thank you, Joel. That's awesome. So the skills are to be able to find it and to be able to release it. And it takes both parts, because you can't release what you don't know exists. And once you find it, you got to be able to get rid of it. So that's a beautiful combination. Well, thank you so much for visiting with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Linda. I appreciate you.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Lisa M. Hayes. She said, "Be careful how you are talking to yourself, because you are listening." Today, I invite our listeners to silence the inner critic and achieve lasting peace. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
I'm a huge fan of the Howard Thurman quote. He said, "Ask not what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who have come alive." So that has always been core to me. Passion and purpose-driven person, curious person, cultivating my intrinsic motivation from the inside out, which connects right to our inner child, right? The inner child is curious naturally. So